full circle is like the idea that you're inviting connectivity to people everywhere. You're inviting openness, you're inviting connection and realness. This is not a pretentious music. Meant to it's meant to be popular through everyone's desire to be themselves.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Okay, good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce himself. Noah, please go
Hey,
ahead.
how are you?
Great. Yeah, tell us, who you are, where you were born, what you do.
So, hello everybody. I'm Noah Jackson. I'm a bassist and a composer, and a cellist from Detroit, Michigan.
Mhm.
I started in just regular primary school. They had a school program where they introduced string instruments to students, and I got a little bit carried away and ended up going into college for jazz performance.
Mhm.
When I was in middle school, I
Was
had
it
a
in Detroit? Sorry, Noah. Was it in Detroit or
the
somewhere else?
school.
Yeah, you were born in Detroit as well, because I know
Yes.
you're living there. Okay.
Well, I was born in Detroit, and then our family moved just north of Detroit to a place called Southfield. It's one of the
Okay.
suburbs of Detroit. So, um, uh, in my early days in middle school, I had a mentor named Marcus Belgrave, and he's a very, very famous trumpet player, jazz musician, played with Ray Charles back in the day. And my friend from middle school had introduced me to this group called Civic Jazz Orchestra, and we used to meet every Tuesday in the church basement in Detroit, and we'd have a lot of people from the area who's had experience in the jazz industry come in and kind of mentor the students and show them the music and some of the elements of the genre. And we all kind of grew as a community together. And so you had these, high school, middle school age kids who were pretty serious about the music, getting together and learning the music. So Marcus Belgrave was the one who saw me in the rehearsal one day when my friend invited me. And at the time, I played a little bit of bass, but I didn't really play jazz bass like that because I was more of a cello guy. And he asked me a couple of questions. He's like, "Well, know what a root is? Yeah. Know what a fifth is? Sure. Know what a third is? Yeah. Major, minor. All right, cool. What about a seventh? Yeah, I know that." So he kind of through there kind of pieced together a way for me to learn how to play bass lines, and I kind of messed around with it, but just like the seriousness and the collective effort of each rehearsal in those days just was so high.
Mm.
And it just made me, and I really love the community there. That's what really drew me into the music. It really wasn't the music itself until I started getting into it, but it was really the community that was kind of formed around that really pulled me in, because I'm like, man, I've never seen these many like kids be so serious about music that isn't really ours, but we're making it ours now. But at the time, especially dealing with the music we had and mentors we had, they're very much into more classic stuff. I mean, I remember my friend burning a CD for Charlie Parker,
Mm.
and I was like, whoa, that's ridiculous. But you don't hear that necessarily out in the general public that readily. Um, so yeah, that was kind of how I kind of came up into
Mhm.
the music. And then over time, I started playing with orchestras and with jazz bands. And once I got to college, I went to Michigan State and studied with Rodney Whitaker, who, huge bass player, used to play with Lincoln Center and Roy Hargrove and with Marsalis and all that. So that that education, that foundation, and he was also part of Civic Jazz Orchestra too.
Mhm.
So having that energy around you, definitely gives you insight to what the possibilities are and what it would look like if I just kept practicing, if I kept that, if I kept going after my craft. So I was fortunate to be in a place, in a space that had all of that kind of built within the program and
Mm.
really accessible for me. So that's how I got
I
into
totally understand, the influence of all these people that were involved with the Civic Jazz Orchestra, but also were you stimulated by your parents or your guardians?
it.
Did they play an instrument? And your
Uh,
siblings? Do you have siblings?
oh no, I'm an only child.
Oh, you're the only child.
Only
Okay.
child, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's just me. My parents, my mother was the creative one.
Hmm.
She always was good with her hands and arts and crafts projects. She used to always make jewelry and necklaces and pins and buttons and pens and beads, all sorts of stuff. And she used to actually be a great crocheter too. So her she used to make me a big old blanket, and it was almost like an heirloom blanket. It was super thick and super comfortable, and she came up into interior design. That was
Hmm.
her thing. So she knew how to draw outfits, draw plans, draw different things. That was her creativity. But my dad, he is a social worker, and he's always had a pretty big heart. Um, and for him, he just loves music. So he was
Hmm.
into prog rock, like Led Zeppelin's his favorite band, uh, Jethro Tull, Laura Nero, Joni Mitchell, some of the original Joni Mitchell, so I got kind of accustomed to that. But he always, whenever he played music, you knew he was in a really good mood.
Hmm.
So it wasn't necessarily that I had musicians in my family or they played instruments, but they appreciated creativity. So when it came to a point where I found music, it wasn't a terribly crazy idea to them. And they were pretty supportive in making sure that I was in all the programs and rehearsals and concerts over the years to develop my craft at such an early age.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Um, you know, you have played with, and you alluded already to that, with quite some jazz greats. Can you share some of your most memorable experiences or lessons learned from working with artists like Abdullah Ibrahim, Branford Marsalis?
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Abdullah Ibrahim uh, is a huge influence in my career. My first uh, regular touring group, I've recorded uh, 2 albums and the soundtrack with him. Been fortunate to play in his trio for 10 years and with the Kaya for 12. Um, he's, you know, really shown me how expansive music could be,
Mm,
because a lot of times, you think about music and what you can add to it and what kind of different sounds you can make. But then for him, it's very elemental. So it's broken down into like the essence of the sound that he hears, even mostly through his touch, really. I mean, he knows a whole slew of music and he knows all the standards, but the information gets condensed into moments.
mm,
And to be able to be around someone who can create like that kind of opens up some possibilities. So, as a musician, you kind of are incentivized to play a lot of notes correctly. And that's kind of like an implicit okayness behind that. Like the more correct notes you play, the better that it sounds. And it's not necessarily that Abdullah plays incorrect notes. It's more about like it's not about the correctness. It's more about him expressing what he hears and translating it for the audience in a way that they could feel
mm,
it.
mm,
And so that was a huge learning experience for me in terms of how the music could flow. And then with Branford, that was a transformative experience for me too, because I've always actually interacted with him since I was a little kid for like a while in random moments. I met him as a bassist when Justin Faulkner first joined the band and they came to the Detroit Jazz Fest and we did like an after hours concert. And I remember feeling how normal it felt to just be on the stage at that moment with him. Even though I
Mm.
wasn't with the band, I was just, playing with, a jazz great, but it didn't feel crazy. And then uh, years later, 9 years later, 10 years later, to play on the stage with him and his band was a very eye-opening experience. And his my first gig with him was the first gig I played, excuse me, the first gig I played after my mother passed away. So, a lot of what have been nervousness and fear and a lot of the jitters that you kind of get from playing like your first big experience was kind of melted away because my mind wasn't caught up in that moment. It's more caught up in just being present and playing. And it was some of the most liberating music I've played, one of the moments I felt like, okay, this is why I play the music, this is what I want to do, just playing with people who are just super attuned to each other and to the moment and to the sound and all that. Like that's what I want to translate for the audience and to pull them into is like what I feel when I feel that and they can feel that too when they listen and be a part of that moment. So that was a huge influence for me. And even some of the younger musicians, Christian Sands, I mean, I went to grad school with him at Manhattan School of Music, and he and I always had this brotherhood together. And so he was always really good with the business end of music and being able to market himself and be forward thinking in that regard. Like that's, something that I've picked up on too with my contemporaries. So, it's always something that you can learn if you're open to it. So that's kind of been my approach with them.
Um, now, thanks for sharing that. I love hearing those type of stories. I do want to talk with you a bit because you were alluding to, more the business side of being a musician. I've been fortunate that, as part of this podcast, I've been talking with quite a number of musicians. It's a tough job. It's tough to make a living, and maybe especially when you play jazz,
Mhm.
even more might be even more difficult than pop, for example. Um, yeah. So how do you are you a full-time musician? Are you able to, or do you need to do other things to,
Mhm.
you know, to get your meals on the table? Tell us about that.
Well, I've lived in New York City for 10 years,
Mhm.
strictly playing music. So, you know, for me, that says a lot about uh, what my potential was at that
Mhm.
time and is even to this day. To be able to last in that city for that long on I mean, most people would have to you're right, would have to do something else or try to like find some other sources of income to support that. But, I've been fortunate to have had consistent work uh, in my time there. My priorities have shifted since COVID, however, in terms
Mhm.
of like what I want to do. And just to go back to what you're mentioning about just like how musicians think about the business side of music, at least for me, when I got into music, I didn't go into the music for the business. I got into music because I was just so drawn by it, and it's a craft. It's something that I'm really passionate about.
Mhm.
Uh, the other side of that, though, is that you don't necessarily, or at least for me, I didn't necessarily think of myself as a business like I do now. Then, or just like approaching my career with a certain kind of intention, like a business would, having like a plan of action, like what creating lead sources and having certain like a feedback system. Different business ideas just weren't in my purview, at least in my time coming up in college, coming up in my early years. And it wasn't until I mean, probably last 6 or 7 years, 7 years or so, I would say, where I started thinking of myself more of a business and approaching that. But even saying that is still a little bit vague. Like, what does it mean to approach your music like a business, right? Like, is my music a commodity? Is my writing a commodity? Like, what kind of market am I participating in? And how do you break down those components to where you can protect yourself, but you can also like earn the income from the assets, and so I've kind of delved into that a little bit, and the pandemic certainly forced me to think of other creative ways to uh, navigate the landscape, because as a jazz musician, it's very difficult to sustain a living just playing jazz music without some level of sacrifice. There's always going to be some level of sacrifice that you have to put forth. But I don't think that you have to necessarily throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think there's ways that musicians can be able to make a substantial living if they thought of themselves as businesses and treat the music as such, and bear that in mind how they negotiate their gigs and how they structure their business, having the proper corporate structure to pay taxes in, so that way you can count the income towards buying a home. So once I got to back to Detroit from the pandemic, I actually got into real estate, and I studied for my realtor license, my
Hmm.
real estate salesperson license, and I
Yeah.
got it. And I ended up actually being a realtor uh, in 2020, mainly because a lot of the touring gigs, so they
Yeah.
weren't
Stopped.
working
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time, and it took some time for that to come back. So I got into real estate and really saw how business was done and how money is made and how integrated in our society, at least in America, real estate has to the overall success or decline of a society or a place. A lot of what we talk about with systemic racism, I think, is you can find it at its core through real estate in terms of like ownership.
Mhm.
Who controls the asset? And it wasn't that long ago where humans were considered assets. So it opened my eyes to like what business actually means. And then I started to see more and more parallels between real estate and music. So I do real estate during the day, and then I do my music during the day too. I kind of fit time blocks throughout my day to make sure that I'm putting the admin forth to create opportunities for my
Mhm.
band, for my music, to perform and to network. I'm still networking with people and expanding out to folks, not just in Detroit, but across my career that I've built in New York. And you have to really be creative with with the music. You got to think of what do you offer, who do you know, and what are different ways I can interact with the music uh, that would give me brand presence for people to know what I offer. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's definitely a mindset shift versus like, am I playing these notes right? Am I playing them correct? Do I get
Mhm.
the grade? Yes or no? Okay, cool. After a certain point, it's like the grades need to turn into money. Like you
Mhm.
got to turn that into a way to support yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's a huge lesson I learned, especially since COVID.
And you're able to juggle the two things also when you are on tour.
Mhm.
How do you do
Yeah.
that then? So because like last summer, if I'm not mistaken, you were almost the whole summer in Europe, right?
Mhm.
That's for the listeners who don't know. Actually, that's how we met. We met on an on an airplane on your way to The Hague to North Sea Jazz, and we started
Yeah.
talking. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was the first leg of our tour at that point, and we recorded our latest album, Three, from that tour. From our London concert.
Okay.
We did it at the Barbican Center. Um, well, I got a planner. I've got, a sheet that I try to like put my objectives on for the day, and I just take one day at a time. And my brain is super, super scatterbrained, so I have to really be intentional on showing up for myself, following up for
Hmm.
myself, and being as consistent as I possibly can to make those steps. I mean, a couple years ago, I ran a whole jazz club and had a tour in Japan. I had to, think about what are the important points and what needs to get done, and stay super organized, which I I didn't have to do much of that, playing, even though I should have been as organized back then. Like the nature of the work
Mhm.
requires you to be on top of those things.
Okay. Let us continue talking a bit about the summer. You know, your Europe tour. That was also when you celebrated your 35th birthday.
Mm,
And I know all these things just for the listeners. Like, how does he know? Well, Noah keeps blogs on his website, so I
mm,
read your blog post.
mm.
But how um, have these recent experiences influenced your outlook on life, and then maybe specifically on the album um, that it's not released yet because we are recording this in the beginning of July, but it will be. You will have released the album when this episode is being shared with the world. So yeah, what happened, during this past year, and how did that influence your outlook as well as your album?
Certainly. This year, I had to really think about what I wanted my musical future to look like, what I want my musical statement to look like. What am I doing? What am I doing here? I had my band play every week over at Cliff Bells, and each week, there was an element or something that would happen over the course of the set that would elevate the band or evolve with the band, and we had built such a cohesion. I wanted to capture that and to show the world like what the Detroit sound actually looks and feels like, but also uh just to put myself out there, like, hey, like this is where I am. I'm here to share this music. Um in that time, I've had to figure out ways to navigate my life with real estate, with music, what I want. I have a lot of FOMO sometimes, thinking about all my friends in New York City and the amazing accomplishments that they're up to. And then it's like, well, it's time. I mean, it's been over time for me to put out a project. I mean, my last project before then was 12, 13 years ago. So 13 years ago, yeah. So I've changed so much in that time, in how I hear things, how I write, the kind of influences I've had. It's actually kind of a cool um, time capsule, if you will,
Mm.
of where I was at musically. And
You were
there,
talking about your album Contemplations.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
contemplations. Yeah, that
And
was,
that's just for the listeners. You can check that out on Spotify as well. It's beautiful though. It's a journey. It's a, yeah, great piece.
yeah, yeah. It's, sometimes I wonder what would it sound like with my current band now.
Mm.
Like what would that look like? But this project, though, I wrote this to make a musical statement, to put myself out there, to share some of my thoughts on how I hear the music evolving. Is contemporary, but I try not to make it too pretentious either, because I want a level of accessibility with my audience, with my music. So over time, we've built a great audience on Wednesdays, and we end up going in the booth and putting it on wax and really trying to capture that cohesion on on records. So I think this project does a great job of that. And then I've got at least two more albums worth of music that I know I can get together and have the band play. And it's going to be fantastic. I'm just glad to be in a position to put out music and to share it with the world and to really bring together people, uh, bring people together. Yeah, yeah, the idea of connection, like that's what the music is supposed to be about. I don't want to superimpose my ideas into their experience. I want to create a platform for experience.
Mhm.
So the kind of people that I want people to be themselves when they hear it. I don't want people to be static. I want folks to move around and dance, but also to have the ears to appreciate what's actually going on in the music.
Um, the name of your band is Full Circle.
Mhm.
The album as name, is that an album of Full Circle, or is that Noah Jackson album?
Mhm.
You know,
It's the name of the album is called Full Circle.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the name of the band, but it's also the name of the album. So
okay,
and
okay,
then it will evolve from there. So so Full Circle would still be the band moving forward, but there'd be different project names, but that would be like the launching point for that.
okay. And going back to your older album, um, maybe you should record that live, your contemplations, all the songs,
Maybe,
and
maybe.
with the band, with the new band.
Hmm.
Um, I would buy that. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I read a lot of of the different blogs that you wrote. One of the blogs you also reflected on the importance of internal growth and self appreciation.
Hmm.
So, how has this introspection influenced your music and your approach to life?
I think my music is a reflection of the self-reflection. I think the music is kind of like a internal snapshot of what those reflections are. Um, the music tends to be a little bit, it relies on a lot of repetition. And part of that is, well, it is intentional in the sense that that repetition invites somewhat like a trance state. And so when you do that, it's not so much that the music guides you to a place. It doesn't necessarily like tell you what that place is, but it's made to take you to a place and what that place and when I wrote that music, I wrote that to invite myself to be present. I wrote my music. A lot of the melodies that I create are in moments where I'm present with like the muse that I have. Every musician will tell you like there's moments where that muse is loud, and there's other moments where that muse is choked up. It's really up to you to pay attention to it and to nurture it and make sure that you honor and respect and nurture your muse. So my music from this upcoming album is going to be a reflection of that. It's going to be a reflection of how how I hear jazz in the context of what I feel and moving kind of outside of the traditional traditional not characteristics, the traditional outlook on jazz, right? Like there's a certain way that when people say jazz, there's a certain preconception of what that is. And there's elements of that preconception and there's elements that aren't. And that's where I exist in that plane. It's like crossover. I try to bring my classical sensibilities into it too. I introduced a little cello as well. And when I layered in cello music, the cello parts with the bass parts, like that is almost kind of like a dialogue within myself. It's a dialogue with uh, my significant other. There's a dialogue that happens within the music. So this music isn't just like statement response or just like just it's not two-dimensional. This is three-dimensional listening. It's a three-dimensional song, and that's what really makes writing the music for this band difficult. Not that the music itself is difficult, but you have to really nurture yourself to a point that invites the melodies to come out the way that it will come out, fitting within the paradigm of full circle. Like, and what does that mean to be in paradigm full circle? Like, full circle is like the idea that you're inviting connectivity to people everywhere. You're inviting openness, you're inviting connection and realness. This is not a pretentious music. It's not meant to, it's meant to be popular through everyone's desire to be themselves. And so anything that comes into that world, that universe, needs to be authentic, and it needs to have a certain level of like natural complexity, but not like artificial, but natural complexity. And sometimes the most complex music is simplest. It's not just like two notes either, but it's more simple in terms of how the textures of the instruments and the melodies interact.
Mm.
So that's what goes into the music. It kind of goes against a little bit of my training in a way where it's like, okay, playing all the notes correct. Yes, the notes in the album are correct, but it's more than that. It's more expansive than that. And that's where a lot of my influence from like Abdullah Ibrahim and all that kind of comes into play.
Okay, you make me very curious about the album. Two quick questions still about the album before we move on to some questions that I would like to ask you that are related with let's say my 100-mile walk that I've been doing since 2012. The first question is, do we hear you play both the bass as well as the cello on the album?
Yes, you do.
Okay. If you have to choose between the bass and the cello, who will you choose?
Why
Which
would,
which
why would, why
instrument?
would we choose?
You love
If
them
it's,
both
if it's
equally.
between your brother and your sister, why would you choose?
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
A trick question. Okay, now when you know that this podcast is a spin-off of a 100-mile walk that I've been doing since 2012, where I try to raise awareness about hunger, poverty, and injustice. And then during COVID, I still walked by myself, but I could not walk with others. So this is kind of virtual walking with others where we talk about life. A question that I ask all my guests is, if you would be asked to walk 100 miles in a week, so that means 15 to 20 miles per day, why would you do that? For which cause?
What will cause me to walk 100 miles?
Yeah.
Hmm. I would do it. I would do it for like connect, like if I wanted to do like some kind of like connection, like self-connection, or if I wanted like some to like cleanse myself, I would do that. Like how people take road trips and they go on like these long journeys. Like I would do it for that.
Mm.
Almost kind of like a sabbatical kind of thing. Um, there's nothing I could think of. Well, there's not too many things I could think of that I would walk 100 miles for, but I would walk 100 miles, not necessarily for a particular item or thing, I mean, maybe I walk 100 miles for my lady, but that's about it, But I wouldn't do it necessarily for a particular person, but I would do it for the purpose of self-discovery, for the purpose of awareness, self-awareness, mindfulness.
Mhm.
I would take the time out to do that. And it doesn't feel like that's impossible. I mean, I've walked from the top of Manhattan Island to the bottom in a day,
Mhm.
and that's about 12 miles. So, and that didn't take all day. So, if you were to do that in like a week, I'm certain you can. It would be like the conversations along the way that will
Mhm.
be fulfilling. Like if I was walking with someone, a group of friends, or
Mhm.
even strangers, and it's like a kind of like a project to do,
Mhm.
like that itself would be what I'll be walking for.
Mm. Okay. Uh, for deepening your relationship with your friends or new people. I hope that this particular podcast helps to connect people. I think there's a lot of polarization going on in the world. What I hope is that these podcasts make people listen to somebody else, and they might not agree necessarily with everything that that person says, but if you listen, that there might be something that you agree with or that you learn. Um, I have a specific question about trying to connect my guests. Um, so I have a question for you from the previous guest.
My question might be, and of course, I have no idea who your next guest is, and I'm sure they'll be interesting because you choose people that I believe have passions and are well-meaning. But somewhere in the overlap between what people do and when they're not seeing the success they want to see with their efforts, perhaps it's because they work for an NGO or the government in power is not supporting their mission, or maybe what they do musically or artistically, creatively is not on, in fashion at a given moment. I'd be curious to know how they compensate for themselves to proceed to maintain their endeavor and their focus and their pushing forward of what's meaningful to them when the current is not going the way they need it or prefer it to go.
I like that. So you're having a conversation with the last person not even knowing it. Um, so I so the way that I do it is consistently writing out my whys,
Mm.
or like having my why, my big why, like present in front of me. So um that would mean that you have to sit down and really meditate on, think about what is your why? What is the thing that gets you up in the morning, that pushes you to go to work? Like, why do you want what you want? Why do you want what you want? Because if what you want isn't truly what you want, then it's not going to work for you to just grind it out of just sheer grit.
Mm.
Like it should certainly, there's gonna be grittiness involved, but you need to have something that's gonna motivate you to the next level. So for me, my why is that I want to fulfill the potential I've always felt within myself. And for me that requires action, because potential is wasted without action. Like why would you even have potential if you're not going to use it? So it leaves me open to doing what my heart really wants to do. I've always seen myself as some kind of composer, like in movies in Hollywood. Um and thinking about that, it's like, okay, well, if I really want to do that, then what am I doing to fulfill my potential? What do I have in front of me to fulfill my potential? I don't want to feel like I'm wasted my potential and all this talent I've developed over the years, just caught in my as ideas in my head. So it's also like preserving the legacy of creativity from Detroit, and a lot of jazz comes through Detroit. A lot of jazz, in fact, I mean, especially as a bass player, I mean, you got all the jazz titans and even R&B titans of bass playing coming from Detroit. So, you know, I mean, from Paul Chambers to Ralph Armstrong to Rodney Whitaker to Ron Carter to uh, James Jamerson to Bob Hurst to, you know, that there's more bass players in like a 30-mile radius from Detroit than there are the Jones Brothers. You know, all this, there's just so much music coming from here, and I really want the world to really feel that. You know, how everyone knows Detroit for cars and bankruptcy and all sorts of like negative connotation, but really like through all that, like music still is a big part of Detroit culture, and I want to make sure that that is still publicly conscious,
Mm.
or it's still in the public consciousness. That's what I still want to make sure that Detroit's impact into music culture is still felt in the public consciousness.
Your question for the next guest.
What is your why?
Okay, great. We talked a lot about music, of course, already, but so even when I talk with business people or NGO workers, I always have a question about the music as well. So I'm going to ask you this question also, and that is, if I ask you to come up with a song or a piece of music that best embodies, for a big part, who you are, Noah, what piece of music or song would that be, and why?
There's two answers to that question, because there's a classical answer and there's a jazz answer. So the classical answer is Rite of Spring.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Rite of Spring,
Okay.
by Igor Stravinsky. I It's my favorite piece of music. There's a weirdness and quirkiness to it. It's very, very complex, but it somehow makes complete sense. There's a lot of great tertiary harmony in there, a lot of just basic harmony, but then it just goes to complete opposite direction, complete left field. And that summarizes sometimes how I feel my brain operates. Is something kind of like that. But I also like Mahler too. So I like the classics too, you know, Mahler too, Beethoven 5, 9, 6, good. But yeah, that would be that. And then for the jazz answer, I mean, there's again, you can go a million different directions. You can go Nefertiti with Miles Davis. Actually, no. I would say number three is a song written by Lawrence Williams. He was a drummer out of Detroit. Marcus Belgrave kind of made it like Detroit's unofficial jazz theme song, but it's got a lot of like jazz messengers energy to it, but written and felt in a very Detroit way. It's super soulful, lots of swing elements, very black, but also it's got this looseness and openness to it, and plenty of space for you to really fill in with color like that. Like music, like Detroit music tends to be very colorful, and that's what I really enjoy about that music. So yeah, number three is kind of where I'm feeling. Although if it go to like the classics, go to like the standards, it'll be mellow tone. Yeah, in a mellow tone, because that's actually the first song I learned in jazz. But when you look at the lyrics and you look at the actual song, it's like, yeah, and then mellow tone, feeling fancy free. I'm not alone. I got company. You know what I mean? Like there's a subtleness, a subtlety to that. That's very classy and poised and sophisticated, but also honest and a little bit raunchy. You know, I can appreciate the levels of the creativity behind the lyricism of that. So mellow tone, man, that's my vibe. In a mellow tone.
Okay.
A mellow tone at number 3.
And you cheated a bit, right? You did not come up with one, but with several.
You know, I got to
But
bend the rules. I got to bend the rules, man. I can't just,
I love that.
do one.
Yeah. Just to remind the listeners, and I don't know if you are aware, but we made a Spotify playlist. When you go to Spotify and you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, you will find all the songs that were selected by my guests. So, and that is from classical music to jazz, hard rock, folk, name it. It's my go-to playlist, if because it brings me back to the conversations that I've had with, now for the last more than 2 years now, I think, more than 200 episodes that I've made on this podcast. So thank you for sharing that, Noah. Before we started recording, you asked me about the UN work. So yes, I'm the main representative of my organization to the UN work. What I try to do also during this podcast is to make people aware about the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think our world is facing a lot of problems, planetary problems, humanity things. So as a world, we decided that we need to make our world more sustainable, and we identified 17 goals that we set. So my question around that is are you aware about those 17 Sustainable Development Goals? And if not, it's not a problem.
No, it's perfectly fine. No, I have actually heard of that.
Okay. So what do you like? What do you want the listeners to know about those 17 Sustainable Development Goals?
I think all of these are great principles to help guide how societies build their infrastructures, build their laws, build their society, how these societies build their way of life. The big question mark is how does these countries reconcile with their cultural background, with their historical background, with their religious background? To how did these countries reconcile that reality to these goals? Because some of these goals might not necessarily align with a person's given national identity. So it's now objectively speaking, like all these elements, I mean, make perfect sense. I mean, if you boil them down, I mean, who wouldn't? No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, like clean water, gender. Now, see, gender equality, that's a big one, right? Obviously, like, I'm a big believer of that. And also, there's a lot of evolution for people, a lot of room for evolution for folks in that regard, how they interact with that. But just to set a standard is, I think, very useful for us to be able to navigate this life, because ultimately, if we're all threatened with an existential dilemma that everyone's going to face at the same time, it's going to take all of us to be able to learn how to cooperate together to solve these problems. So, to have a structure in which we can have these conversations to solve them, I think is going to be helpful. But again, the incentives have to align with these two. And if there's not much of an incentive or a reason for these countries to push for these initiatives, then it's just words on paper.
Great. No, and very good point you're making. Yeah, just a quick reaction from my side. So those 17 sustainable development goals, I think they're not perfect, but they are a result of conversations of many countries. So that's a great thing. We all agreed. So there are universal principles. Do all countries properly try to reach them? No. I mean, in the US, they've never made a report on their progress towards this. It's actually the only country who has never made a report. So, there are small countries out there that have done it. So definitely there is, room for a lot of improvement. The other thing is that before 2030, these goals should be reached. But at the moment, on average, we are only at 15%. So that is worrisome. And then, Noah, what a growing group of people is saying is, basically what these SDGs, these global goals are about are system changes that we need as a world.
Right.
But if you don't pay attention to the ability, skills, and knowledge as an individual and as communities to work on these system changes, then it's not going to happen. So, they came up with what they've called inner development goals. So 5 goals are there: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And, skills need to be developed as empathy, trust, critical thinking. And basically, it's my effort to also to translate what I think you said in terms of, you have to work on yourself, you have to work on your community, in order to make those changes happen at the end of the day. So
Yeah, change starts from the inside out. Yeah.
yeah. So, these conversations always go really fast. Any last message, invitation, or question to the listeners from you?
I guess I would invite your audience to be aware of, be conscious of where you are investing your resources for the arts. It feels like, your audience is very attuned with culture, the arts, and some of these things that make life worth living, instead of just waking up and paying bills. Like it feels like your audience has an appreciation for the well-being of culture. So in order for that culture to exist, it's important that you consume it with a similar vigor as you would with any other product that you might buy. So if you really like an artist, buy their products, tell other people about them and any opportunity you can. Really spread that word, because the minute that we stop talking about all the creatives that are doing work outside of the mainstream, then the harder it would be to have that environment where new work can be created, where new artists can be found, where new genres can be supported, because you're going to need multiple people to interact with that. And the only way to support that is having a robust audience that's willing to put their money where their mouth is. So, it's important that everyone, buy everyone's album. I mean, we sit here and we talk about how the cost of everything goes up, but then you don't think about, well, one is still paying for a car note, one is still paying their mortgage, one is still paying their bills, even though these prices are going up, and they're doing it while they're complaining. And yet, if an artist comes out with a product or some music, there's a conversation about, oh, is it too expensive? Is it worth it? Look, if the music is worth preserving, then invest in it, and every little bit counts. Every little bit counts. So I really encourage your folks to, support your local musicians, support your local art scene. Go to concerts, go attend the talks, go attend, like make a point to do like one thing a month. Even like everyone can do one thing a month in the arts to help keep things sustainable. And if you want to do it once every 2 weeks, if you can afford to do that, do that. But like try to make it as easy as you can but as consistent as you can to support your local art scene.
Here, and I can, talking from the inner development point of view is music or going to a museum is good for your being, for yourself, and developing your perspective, working on your listening skills. So I totally agree. I Before I forget, I always have a special question for the musicians, uh, and that is, if you had to choose between a duo, a trio, a quartet, or a quintet, which one would you choose?
That's an unfair question. Again, making me choose. I've always felt an affinity to play in trios.
Okay, trios. If you
Yeah.
could start a band with musicians, dead or alive, who would you pick for your trio?
What a question. Interesting. Elvin and Branford. I'll be interested in hearing that. Elvin Branford and Kenny Kirkland. That would be interesting. That would be very interesting. And then you can throw in like Freddie Hubbard. Like what would that feel like? Like that hard bop in a modern context. That would be very, very interesting. Um
That's a quartet you came up with, but okay.
oh, if
That's
I do like a trio. So if I
yeah.
were to do a trio, okay. Well, I would see. Okay, so Justin Faulkner is one of my favorite drummers of my contemporaries, and I wonder what that would sound like with someone like Phineas Newborn.
Okay.
It's like Oscar, like a modern version of Oscar Peterson Trio. I
Hmm.
wonder what that would feel like.
Okay. And
Yeah,
assume you will play the bass.
or sorry, Oscar Peterson, not Oscar Pettiford. What was it? Was that? So I play bass. Yeah, I'll play bass.
Okay. Great. Um, th- yeah. Noah, thank you so much for making time to speak with me. Share your experiences, stories, wisdom. Thank you for who you are, what you make. Any question that I should have asked, but I didn't?
Um, uh, I feel that's actually a great question because I haven't thought of any questions that you could have asked me to kind of, I mean, we promoted the album pretty well. Um, talked about Detroit. We talked about how I heard about the music. We didn't talk about who I played with a lot.
Mhm.
I guess it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it kind of got sprinkled throughout. Um, that's
So maybe that's. I mean, you've written a little bit on your blogs about that. So maybe that's a good topic to write about for your blogs, and we'll make sure that your website is mentioned in the podcast notes,
mhm,
and people should check that out and check
mhm.
out your album. So, and
Okay.
follow you on your social media. Um, and yeah, so I before we say goodbye, I was thinking about how we met, and and then we got talking, and so I would really encourage people to, when they're traveling and they're on the road, to talk with people. It's so wonderful to expand friendships and meet folks with different
Yeah.
experiences, and
Open
yeah,
up
it
your
has been great.
net of opportunity.
Yeah. Oh,
You never know what kind of conversations you find yourself in, or what kind of people you meet, or opportunities that might come from those kind of serendipitous interactions.
exactly.
So, hey, thanks, Noah, and all the best.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.